Are modern people's brains broken, in your opinion?
Broken's is a big word. And I definitely can identify with being broken with my traumatic brain injury when I was a child and my learning difficulties and people teasing me, calling me broken. And I feel like our minds are under assault for sure. With technology, I don't think that's like technology is the reason, but certainly technology can amplify the issues of distraction and forgetfulness and this kind of overload, information anxiety. And it's an interesting world. The amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds, but I feel like we're not really prepared. I don't know a lot of people who aren't struggling right now with forgetfulness or distraction, maintaining their concentration. It feels like taking a sip of water out of a fire hose nowadays just to kind of catch up and keep up. Yeah, how you doing with this data deluge?
It's interesting because obviously I consume so much for the podcast,
Yeah,
prep for the guests and other reading and then my own reading, and then the useless consumption of everything from social media to YouTube when I'm watching, when I'm trying to eat my lunch and stuff. It's a mixed bag because there are so many amazing insights that I really value, and yet coming along for the ride is this kind of ambient distraction, almost like this habituated ADHD thing that comes in where I just find myself task switching, even though I don't need to. So, from you've spent forever studying the brain, both for yourself and from a professional perspective.
yeah.
How many of the problems that people are dealing with when it comes to focus and attention are an inbuilt endemic part of being a human? And how many do you think are novel and can be laid at the feet of the modern world?
Well, were definitely simpler for our brains as hunter and gatherers, right? We want to be able to survive, and that's a big prerogative. We want to be able to reproduce. We want to be able to know where all the fresh water is and the enemy tribe and where the fertile soil is. Nowadays, though, every day I feel like people are just they're sprinting just to catch up, right? New technology, new people, new ideas, fast changes, endless updates. It's happening in our careers and school and business, industry, and literally every person's daily life. And so people feel a little overwhelmed by the growing like the data clutter. You're stressed out by all the knowledge that you must absorb and process and read and recall.
Mm.
The nature of my work is really how do you stay on top and deal with all that?
Yeah, I've noticed executive function, so your ability to kind of project manage yourself
Yeah.
and what's happening is increasingly like the vanguard of my life. Right. It really is. It's like it's the absolute front lines of what's going on because there is so much different inputs and so many different things to do. And, I could go down that rabbit hole and I could have this conversation with this person and maybe I'll do this thing. And there was a point probably like June of 2011 where the amount of information that people wanted and the amount of information that was available around about balanced. And for almost all of human history, there was less. And then it got to, I don't know, at some point in the last sort of 50 years, it hit equilibrium. And then very quickly, it just blasted straight through. So previously, the smart thinker was somebody who was able to scout for information and actually find information. Whereas now, the most important tool, I think, is someone who's able to discern appropriately, and they're able to triage and they're able to titrate whatever it is that's needed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely a filtering issue and a prioritizing issue also as well. I mean, we have unfeathered access to the world's information. They say that with our phones, we have more access to information than President Clinton did when he was in office, and we're just carrying it around with us. And I don't know if the human brain really evolved to deal with that onslaught, with all the context switching of social media, with all the rings and pings and dings and app notifications, all the social media alerts. It's a different animal nowadays, and I think more than ever we need to really invest in our brains to upgrade our brains. We hear about upgrading our technology all the time. You get the newest iPhone and you upgrade your apps and your software, your television, whatever. But not a lot of talk about upgrading the most important technology that has created all the technology, which is the brain. And so That's the nature. I feel like a lot of people also don't know enough about their brain. It's not really taught in school. There's no owner's manual. It's not really user friendly, but it controls everything. I think we live in the millennium of the mind. I don't think any of the listeners solely. It's not like it was hundreds of years ago where it was really our value in society was our brute strength. Today, it's our brain strength, right? It's not our muscle power as much as it is our mind power, our ability to learn, to unlearn, to relearn also. I was doing a program I just did a Google Talks. And I remember when I first started doing trainings at Google, helping with mental fitness, there was this quote from Eric Schmidt, who was then chairman, and said the amount of information, I'm paraphrasing, the amount of information that's been created through the dawn of humanity to the year 2003, which was only, 2 decades ago. How long does it take to create that amount of information today? And the answer was like 48 hours. I mean, we're drowning in it. You think about all the podcasts, right? And the social media, YouTube, there's just so much information, but how we learn it and read it, understand it, that hasn't changed a whole lot. We live in an age of autonomous electric cars, spaceships that are going to Mars, but our vehicle choice in comparison when it comes to our own personal learning is more like a horse and buggy. So I feel like we could really, do well by upgrading some of these mindset and these methods.
What do you wish more people knew about how the brain works, functionally? Like there's interesting stuff to do with the pituitary and the hypothalamus and blah, blah. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of how people use their brain and what they want it to do, if you were to give a bunch of headlines, you had a bunch of billboards out there that you could maybe put some things on to remind people, what would be the lessons that you wish people knew about the thermodynamics of their own mind?
So stress response probably is up there. I don't know if it'd be the top one, but it's invisible for a lot of people because we're so used to it. It's like a fish in water, not recognizing the water because it's always present. We know that chronic stress could potentially shrink the human brain, puts you in fight or flight. The cortisol, the adrenaline, and I feel like it keeps you in your survival brain, and maybe you're held hostage from your executive functioning, from your ability to solve problems, from your own creativity. Chronic stress will shrink the brain. Chronic fear, and we live in a society with marketing and media where it's perpetual fear. And, if it bleeds, it leads, and it's very intelligent. It's working exactly how it's designed to work. But I think that there's also the analogy is like there's this algorithm, just like there's an algorithm with social media. Whatever you engage with, you see more of, right? And you engage in all the entrepreneur stuff or the cat videos you like and share and comment, you get more of it in your newsfeed. But I feel like if whatever we engage with our mind also, if we're looking at what's threatening and scary and what could harm us, like in the news, then, whatever we engage with, we tend to see more of it all the time. And chronic fear will actually suppress your immune system, which is a big issue nowadays because you can't go on social media or the news without seeing something that's, life-threatening, and it feels like it's happening local, even if it's happening more global. Whole area of science called psychoneuroimmunology. It's where we're more susceptible to colds, the flus, the viruses. So I think having even just coping mechanisms to deal with stress. Some people do body work. Some people get do mindfulness training or meditation, or they use a float tank or any of these biohacks. But I feel like we're under a lot of undue stress, and that locks up our nervous system. And it's hard to learn. If you're wired for survival and that's your mindset, you're not in it. Those creative juices aren't flowing, right? And I feel like we're not using all of that potentiality that our mind has.
I've got an interesting story about this. So I'm currently doing my first live shows.
Nice.
Stepping out on stage, it's 90 minutes of solo talking. All of the events were sold out in under 60 minutes, 2,000 people across the UK and Ireland. And then we're doing 1,500 people in Dubai. And then I've got a US and Canada tour coming up with James Smith at the end of the year. Anyway, I know the stuff that I'm talking about, right? I know this stuff implicitly. I came up with the ideas. It's all bro science, bro philosophy stuff that I've come up with, right? And it's stories from where I've been and who I've spoken to and all the rest of it. And the first time that I did this show, I was so nervous backstage that when I went out, it was like somebody had just put blinkers on my mind.
Mm.
And I'm trying to access the stories that literally I created, right? I made these things myself,
Yeah.
and somehow I can't access the things that I had. Now, thankfully, I had a comfort monitor and it could, keep on prompting me. But without that, if you just said, okay, and now talk to me about the lonely chapter and talk to me about the tall girl problem and talk to me about blah, 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 I just didn't have access to it. And that is a very acute version of this, right? Everyone
Yes.
knows. Everyone knows. The nerves kick in, something happens, and you go, my performance isn't where it was supposed to be. Morgan Housel taught me about this guy, Archibald somebody. Let me check my notes from yesterday. What was the fucking guy's name? This dude in the 1900s, early 1900s, Archibald Hill. He studied how quickly people could run, and he was able to predict, based on VO2 max and lactate threshold and all this stuff, he could predict how quickly they would do a mile or whatever distance around a track unbelievably accurately. But
Wow.
it had basically zero predictive power when it came to competition races. And this was highly criticized. It's like, hang on a second, I thought you've got this formula and it only works in one context. Well, yeah, because when you take them out of that context and into a competition, all bets are off. All rules are out of the window. It's a different predisposition, their adrenaline, their cortisol, all of this, the amount of sleep that they had last night. He
Yeah.
told me this story about the greatest downhill skier, a female downhill skier ever, this lady. And maybe she was Canadian, and she would throw up before every single race that she did.
Wow.
You're an
Wow.
elite athlete, right? And you've optimized your hydration and think about your sleep. And just before you step out on stage, blah, you throw up. And you go, okay, like all of that stuff was totally out. But look at what she does in training. In training, she doesn't throw up. So I just think, yeah, the ability for fear, stress, overwhelm, especially acutely, to just completely wreck our performance it's wild. And I've felt that firsthand, and I'm now worked out for me a process that I can go through before a live show so that I don't feel like that. But without that tool, I was just at the mercy of the winds of my fear and stress.
And I think a lot of listeners have their stages, right? If you're on stage and you switch contexts, there's that phrase in that content is king, right? Or content is queen. But if content is king, then I think context is the kingdom, right? And all learning and performance is context dependent, without a doubt, and it's also state dependent. Practicing in the environment that you need to be able to perform in those kind of conditions. And even if it's not the external environment, the internal environment is mirroring, or you're using the power of your imagination to be able to replicate that and rehearse on a regular. Yeah, my biggest challenge besides the learning growing up was public speaking by far. I mean, this wasn't
You really
even
chose the right career, didn't you? As
yeah,
an expert in learning who often does public speaking.
This is my lot in life for sure. It's but it's a testament that, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of listeners, that with challenge comes change, right? With our struggles, they can become strengths. Because I had my learning difficulties and I was labeled broken, I would be terrified of public speaking because I just never knew the answer. It took me 3 years longer to learn how to read. So it's very embarrassing. And I think that's those circles, where those reading circles, I think a lot of fear of public speaking came from that, right? Where you pass around the book and you had to read out loud a paragraph or a page. And that was like the worst for me. I mean, even just thinking about it, my stomach, I get nauseous. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I could relate to these performers where they're just throwing up and vomiting. And because I was in the nurse's office all the time, and it was all self-inflicted for sure. I mean, part of it might have been strategic to get out of class. So I wanted to be called on and I wouldn't have to give that book report in front of the class. But it was terrifying. I never knew the answer. My superpower back in school was being invisible. I mean, it was shrinking down. I mean, even my physiology, I was always like, collapsing. So I would take up less space in the world so I wouldn't be noticed. And, at that time, I didn't really want to be seen. I mean, probably I did, right? I mean, everyone wants to be seen. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. But, my coping mechanism was just avoidance. It was just hard. And so, yeah, you're right. Life has a sense of humor because those are my challenges. Now all I do is public speak on this thing called learning. But, I think adversity can be an advantage. I don't know one strong person that had an easy life, right? And so I feel like certain things come into our lives, just like the hero's journey. I opened Limitless Expanded with Joseph Campbell's like the stages of the hero's journey, because I want people to feel like that they are the hero. They are the Dorothy or the Luke Skywalker, if you were taking on the big bad witches, or the the Death Star, those kind of things, finding a mentor and coming back and returning with some gems, some golds, and that they could share with the rest of the world.
What do you think are the biggest lies of learning?
Goodness. Yeah, a lie is, for me, I use a lot of acronyms because they're shortcuts for, these mnemonics we used back in school, like HOMES for the Great Lakes, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. There were like these mental shortcuts. So for lies, for me, is a limited idea entertained. I feel like it's, a lie. That's what a lie is. We talk about, various things in the section on mindset that could hold us back, because if you want to achieve something, a lot of people want to go right to the methods. And I'm definitely guilty of that. But I think so many people, including a lot of your listeners, they know what to do, but they're not always doing what they know. And if they sabotage, it's usually a mindset issue, because they're buying into these lies. Like one of them could be genius is born, right? And it's been my experience the past 30 years of just coaching is that genius, while there's certain traits, certainly if you're born with a certain height or certain attributes, you certainly have an advantage in today's marketplace and in the world, in competitions. But also I think genius could certainly be built, right? I think when somebody exhibits something that looks like magic to the rest of the world, there's a method behind it, and I think part of genius is pattern recognition, seeing the invisible that makes this possible. And for me, it's always a combination of mindset, motivation, methods to kind of create this momentum in your life by kind of unlimiting these areas. And so one of them would be genius is born as opposed to being built. I talk about this story, because we learn through stories, and you're an amazing storyteller. Always watching your YouTube and just really observing at a meta level your style. But there was this one where there was this king, and they had this performer, and this performer was doing was basically, it had magic, right? And the counselor was like, "Hey, and this is genius is born. It's not born; it's built." And the king was really upset by that, because the king really wanted to buy in that, people are born with genius, with this amazing talent. And so to punish the counselor, he put him in the basement of the kingdom. And just to add salt to the wound, he gave them like 2 little piglets to live with, right? Like be with your own kind of thing. And while this counselor was there, he would take the piglets and hold them underneath his arms and then run up and down the stairs. Every single day, multiple times a day. And one day the king, weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe months later, thinks about the counselor and says, "Hey, bring the counselor, back to my throne room. I want to see how he's doing." And he comes, and he's jacked. I mean, because these piglets eventually, got bigger and he got stronger because of it. And he, in front of the whole kingdom, he was like, "Look at this magnificent specimen, and of course the wise counselor said the same thing he said before, that genius is not born, it is built, through dedication, through training, through deep work."
Well, that story must very much resonate with you. As somebody who the setbacks with regards to learning and public speaking and so on and so forth, to now being someone who specializes in precisely the thing that you were the most terrified about. And if I was talking with Dan Bilzerian last night, and he didn't have that on your bingo card for me talking about.
I didn't.
And he was saying how his story, his success, particularly with women, but also in other areas of life as well, that he wasn't particularly funny. He's 5'9". He's not particularly good looking. Most of his face is hidden by a beard. He wasn't particularly anything, really. He wasn't super smart in school. Like, he kind of got through the tests that he needed to, just about, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of raw materials, an incredibly, mostly average guy, pretty intelligent, I guess, but mostly average guy with a very extraordinary outcome. And he was saying about how he feels like the story he has, at least from a female success perspective, should be something that other men find empowering or inspiring. Because look, like, I'm not fucking Brad Pitt. I'm not 6'5". I'm not like this, super good looking dude. I wasn't super funny. I wasn't a stand-up comedian. I didn't have any of the things, in terms of raw materials coming to this. And I think normal people doing extraordinary things is spectacular. But for the most part, everybody was normal at some point. There are crazy outliers, right? And a lot of the things that make people outliers are the very, very hidden things. Their predisposition for conscientiousness, their ability to deal with resilience in hard times, that, those sorts of things, the kind of more like soft, hard skills, I guess. But yeah, man, I always think about the journey that people got to do something absolutely spectacular. And over the last few years, since spending time around, outlier people in every different industry, they're so normal. Like, they're so incredibly normal, and they're still riddled with the same, self-doubt and uncertainty and lack of esteem and all the rest of it, desire for validation. Almost all of them are. And you think, oh, well, that's like an oddly normal thing for this very extraordinary person to have. And that's comforting, I think. Like, to see that the gods are mortal is comforting.
Yeah, it certainly makes it relatable, without a doubt, to know that these people are flawed. I talk a lot about superheroes because I mentioned I couldn't read. I taught myself how to read by reading comic books, and I don't know what it was. My uncle gave me a comic book when I was a child, and I would just look at it and I would read these comic books. Even if the words didn't make sense, I'd be underneath the covers, of my bed with the flashlight, and something about the illustrations really brought the story to life and gave words the meaning. And when I started to understand the words, it was very comforting because I would escape. My parents immigrated to the States, and we didn't have a lot of resources. Certainly the education, money, that kind of thing. But yeah, it would allow me to escape because I was, being bullied in school, and that's not fun for anyone who's gone through that. Had a lot of self-doubt, but I would use it as inspiration. And these superheroes offered hope. They offered, like, wow, these people are helping other people, and they were flawed too. Like Spider-Man and Iron Man was an alcoholic, and a lot of people had issues. A lot of them were orphaned. Superman, Spider-Man, Batman. I mean, you just think about the beginnings of their superhero, their origin stories. They had a lot of a tragedy. And it's a matter of, there's a quote in Limitless that from a French philosopher that says life is the letter C between B and D, right? B is birth, D is death, life, C, choice. And we're constantly making these choices about who we're spending time with, what are we going to do, what are we going to eat, where are we going to put our focus, but also choices on what things mean. Like the meaning we're associating to what's going on, if this is here to hurt us or this is here to prepare us. And I think that meaning as part of the mindset, it affects what you believe is possible, what you believe you're capable of, maybe even what you believe you deserve. And it becomes this internal thermostat where a lot of times we're acting like a thermometer, where we're just reacting to the environment, right? We react to politics, react to, global wars, react to how people treat us, we react to the weather. But I feel like the people who have, more agency and a level of sovereignty, they feel like, they could be a thermostat. They don't not reacting. They could gauge. They know what the temperature is. But then they also said they have a vision. They set some kind of standard. They set a temperature, and then the environment reacts to it. If I was to go back to that child, the two beliefs I would instill in like my 9-year-old self would be like, hey, you are 100% responsible for your life. Right? You can make excuses, you can complain, and probably some of it is true, but so what? Like, what's the difference? It doesn't change the situation at all. And it wastes a lot of time, wastes a lot of energy. And the truth is, we can't be upset, by the results we didn't get from the work we didn't do. There's just a truth to it. And sometimes we're our worst enemy.
You said on a podcast I listened to recently, if you fight for your limitations, you'll keep them. If you argue for your limits, they're yours.
Yeah.
Given that there is one of the pandemics that didn't come from a virus, kind of like a pandemic of nihilism or apathy, or
Yeah.
at least limiting beliefs, or believing. What would you say? Somebody has kind of got themselves into a routine of despondency and externalizing of the locus of control and not believing that they can maybe make the progress that they do. What do you say to them to try and drag them out of that?
Well, for each person, I mean, I would want more context with that person and more connection. I mean, you're really good with social dynamics, which is, really shows up in your conversations with people. I would say reminding people that they have agency is not, it's one thing to know it intellectually, it's another to like embody it, right? That, our world is a reflection of our choices, and, giving people examples certainly potentially could help getting them to, even with children, right? Like if a child, let's say you're trying to you're really strict with their diet, and they go to a birthday party and they eat this food, instead of like criticizing them for them, just like having them self-aware, realizing, and just asking them, how do you feel, right? And what caused that, and so they can see like cause and effect. I feel like we all play a role in sometimes in our own misery, and the challenge is, when the story I tell is when I got to spend some time with Stan Lee, right, the co-creator of so many Marvel superheroes, and we're going out to dinner, and I just have this time with him solo, and I was just like, hey, I'm dying to know, like, who's your favorite superhero? You've created everybody, right? The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and so on. And he looks at me, he's like, Iron Man. And he says, Jim, who's your favorite superhero? And I was like, it's got to be Spider-Man, because he had this big Spider-Man tie. And without a pause, he goes in his iconic voice, with great power comes great responsibility. And we all know that. I guarantee you, all your listeners know what word was coming. And I switch words still to this day, maybe because I had a few too many head injuries as a child. When I read, sometimes I'll switch them, or I hear it. And I was like, you're right. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is certainly also true. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make things better, right? With these choices that we make every single day. And so, yeah, I think agency is very important, that you are 100% responsible. And I also have this belief that everything, Marie Forleo has this word, everything is figure outable, right? You have agency, and you could figure it out with enough commitment and creativity. And I feel like we grossly underestimate our own capabilities. When I say people fight for the limitations, they get to keep them, I hear it on a regular. I'll be on stage, and before I go on, people grab me invariably and say, I'm so glad you're here. Can't wait to hear your talk. You're the memory expert. And I'm telling you, I'm too old. I'm just too stupid. I have a horrible memory. And that's the context where I say, hey, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. I tell them that your brain is this incredible supercomputer, and your self-talk is the program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you won't remember the name of the next person you meet, because you program your supercomputer not to. I believe that if people truly understood how powerful their mind is, they wouldn't say, think, or even feel something they didn't want to be true. And again, I'll stipulate that, yes, you have one negative thought, it's not going to ruin your life, obviously. But just like eating that one donut or muffin's not going to ruin your life. But if you ate dozens of those donuts every day, every single day, it would definitely have some kind of effect. And so I think we have to stand guard to the doors of our mind, and realize again that that thoughts, we don't have to believe everything that we think. And we could also adjust what we think. People say I'm not smart enough, or I don't have a great memory. Just, editing it. Like, I don't have a great memory yet. It just feels different. It just lands different, and it gives you some kind of hope to be able to move forward.
How does memory actually work? Moving beyond the stories that we tell ourselves,
Yeah.
what are the nuts and bolts of how memory works?
There are three phases to memory. There's the encoding phase, there's the storage, and then there's the retrieval phase. And so I believe there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory, and there's an untrained memory. Unfortunately, it's not really taught in school. I mean, maybe they took some kind of class in high school or maybe college, but I don't know how practical it is. One of the things I'm obsessed with, even when I'm listening to podcasts or reading books, is like, how can I use this, right? When will I use this, right? Why must I use this? How does this relate to what I already know? I feel like so many people learn passively, right? And the human brain, I don't think it learns best through consumption, because we're consuming all the time. And so many people's lives, you talk about mental masturbation. So many people just get addicted to just, novelty, and they're just buying books and they sit on the shelf unread and become shelf help, not self help, that whole dangerous spiral. But, the whole idea is you learn something, so how you could apply it, right? If somebody isn't consistently doing something and they're procrastinating, they're self-sabotaging, it's usually a mindset or a motivation issue. But going back to memory, I'm always thinking like, hey, I want to make this more sticky. So how can I encode it by not just hearing it? Maybe I could see it and use more of my nervous system. Maybe I could tap into some of those feelings, right? You have that middle brain where you have like this seahorse looking part of your brain called hippocampus, which is primarily function as memory. Attached to it is this little almond shaped part of your brain called the amygdala, which is like a switching station for emotion. And it's interesting that, the where memory is being processed, it's also connected with emotions. I think information today, it's everywhere, right? So it's very forgettable. It's very ordinary. But information, when it's tied with emotion and visualization, becomes unforgettable, right? When you hear it, feel it, see it, then you're recruiting more of your nervous system, and you're more likely to be able to retrieve it. The storage part is interesting because we teach people methods like a mental filing system, something like memory palaces, back in the ancient Greeks. So we write Limitless Expanded, and I pull on and draw on, neuronutrition and neuroscience and adult learning theory. Also, though, ancient wisdom. I just feel like, what did people do before there were books? What did people do before there were like the internet? How did they remember things before there was a printing press? How did they pass on history and information around campfires? And one of the techniques was a storage device. Where you use locations that you're very familiar with, like maybe your home, your school, your office, the mall, maybe parts of your body, your car, and just taking the information that you want to remember and placing it intelligently around those locations. Because as hunter-gatherers, we didn't need to memorize lots of numbers or lots of words. We needed to remember where things are, right? Where the clean water is, where is the fertile soil, where's the enemy tribe, all the survival, right? And so even when people forget someone's name, they tend to ask themselves questions like, where do I know this person from, right? Because again, the context gives you the content. They've done studies where they'll submerge people with breathing apparatus underwater and give them things to remember, like maybe something simple like lists of words, and then they'll take them out of the pool and they'll test them and see how many they recall. Very simple. And then they'll submerge them back under the water and test them. And in which environment do you think had greater recall? Right? I was underwater, and we could probably guess that. But the idea here is, when you're studying something, the environment also is getting anchored to that information, and helps you to greater retrieve it. So if you we were talking about before, if you are on stage and you got the opportunity to rehearse and practice and review your information and study in that same context, you're more likely to be able to access more of that information, because unconsciously, the light, the smells, everything gets anchored to the information. Now, that's not possible for a lot of people. Like maybe you could prepare in the board meeting there and then perform there also, or study in class and then perform in class, but it's not usually the case. So even something simple is giving yourself a trigger. I know you've done episodes about habits and triggers, and having prompts for certain behaviors. You could bring the environment with you. You could take a certain, one of the most, out of the five senses, smell is definitely the one most closely connected to human memory. Maybe
smell is the most closely associated sense to human memory.
Right. I think and maybe there's a reason for that, right? If you smell poison, it could save your life, or food is rotten, you'd be able to recall that. That's part of your survival. And we all have this I'm sure there's a fragrance or a food that could take you back to when you were a kid. We all have those things. And the idea here is, so going back to how the environment gets anchored to your study and your recollection, you could actually bring it smell. Like, let's say you're preparing for your talk and you want to remember all the different points when you're live on stage. You could, while you're preparing, you could have a unique cologne or essential oil, or they say chewing gum could potentially help with your memory, but a specific flavor. And then but it has to be unique, so it's not diluted in terms of learning. And then when you want to be able to perform, use that same essential oil or, scented lip balm, gum, whatever it is, and that'll help trigger all the information and data that you were rehearsing. And so, but the storage part is interesting, because using your body or using your microwave, like imagine you're in your kitchen and you go clockwise around your kitchen and say, okay, the first place is the microwave, the second place is the stovetop, the third place is the refrigerator, fourth place going around, I'm doing my kitchen, is the dishwasher, and then the fifth place is the sink. Then that would be a way of using your memory palace. And then you could go into the adjacent room and do the bookshelf and the fireplace and the coffee table, whatever. And then the idea here is, let's say you need to give a TEDx talk. You could take the information and turn it into a picture, because most of us tend to think in pictures. If I ask you to tell me about your car, right? Well, why don't we do this? So tell me about your car.
It's a BMW 123D. It's like a coupe thing. It's blue. It's got matte gray alloys, cream seats.
Amazing. So when you see BMW and blue and matte gray, you don't see those words, right? When you're saying it, you see an image of it. And our visual cortex takes up the most real estate in our brain, which is probably why people are better with faces than they are with names, right? You see the face, but you heard the name. You go to someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never go to someone and say, I remember your name, but I forgot your face. So it would make a lot of sense. There's a Chinese proverb that says, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. I heard the name, I forgot the name, or I heard it on the podcast, I forgot it, right? I saw the face, what you see you remember. And what you do, going to the power of practice, right? And rehearsal and study and deep work, then you really truly understand it. Because I feel like you don't understand unless you could do it. That's just a kind of a principle and then behind every principle, there's some kind of promise and some kind of reward. And so, like, let's say you wanted to give a talk. In the book, I talk about how 1/3 of your cognitive performance, brain health, is predetermined by genetics and biology. It's pretty accepted in the neuroscience space, but that means 2/3 is in your direct control. And I talk about the 10 levers that would move that, right? And so if somebody wanted to know what those 10 things are and they had to give a TEDx talk next week about it, first of all, when I want to learn something faster, I learn it with the anticipation and the intention of teaching it. And so it doesn't matter what I'm learning, even if I'm not really going to teach it, I intend to teach it. So when I'm reading, I'm thinking, how does this relate to me? And when I'm listening, I'm taking better notes, right? If somebody had to teach it, they call it the explanation effect. When you learn with the intention of explaining to somebody else, you're going to learn it better because you're going to focus better. You're going to ask more questions. You'll probably take better notes. And when you teach it, you get to learn it twice, right? So, like, if people have that perspective as they're listening to this conversation, like, how would I teach this to somebody else? I'll, talk about the 10 keys maybe that move the needle, science-based, and think about it not just like, oh, that's great information, but ask yourself, how can I use this? How can I apply it? How can I teach it to somebody I care about? Right? Because the number one reason to learn something is how it would benefit you, but the close second is how it could benefit somebody else, right? You learn so you can get some kind of benefit to return, right? And to be able to share it with somebody else. And also when you share it, it benefits you also as well, because you get to be an expert at that subject matter more easily. So you kind of go through like some of these 10 keys.
Yeah, dude, I want to get high level. Let's go through all of them. I want to hear them.
Okay. So the first, in no particular order, let's start with a good brain diet, right? What you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. The area of science, there's a whole chapter in the book on neuronutrition, that your brain is only 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of the nutrients. And it's an energy hog, right? It uses up a lot of energy.
Chess players burn some ungodly amount of calories, right? Like the most
Yeah.
static sport in history.
Extremely, right? I know a number of them that are just always, calorie deficient, but they're always eating without a doubt.
Never see a fat chess player.
Yeah, this is true. And so another reason why you want to be mentally engaged, right? We hear a lot about physical fitness, which obviously relates also to your mental performance as well. And we could talk about that because that's one of the 10 things. But going back to neuronutrition, certain foods, and I'll stipulate this with, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, but and go get a food sensitivity test, right? Do a nutrient profile, because not everything is for everybody. I really do believe everyone's bio-individual. Generally, though, avocados, the monounsaturated fat, your brain is mostly fat, is fatty. So, what you eat matters, again, for your gray matter. Blueberries. And, I put this on my body. So I always remember when I'm at the store, I use this as a memory palace, my body. So I imagine the avocados, using it as a scalp conditioner, like guacamole, or buying blueberries, right? Or mulberries. A lot of the berries, they're brain berries. They're full of antioxidants, very neuroprotective. Blueberries coming out of your nose. And, and when you're doing it, you imagine that you're a child, because children are such fast learners, because they're playful and they use their imagination. That's how they remember people's names. I mean, I don't know if people made fun of your name growing up, but certainly with the last name Kwik, I got I was the bunt of a lot of jokes, but that's how kids remember, right? They say, Tony, Bobammy, like they make the rhymes, they make it fun. Yeah. And so imagine you're 8 years old and blueberries coming out of your nose. Broccoli is a brain food, high in vitamin K. The sulforaphane in broccoli is very good for your brain, especially if you sprout them. It tends to be like even 10 times more sulforaphane, which potentially can help with BDNF, the brain-derived neurotropic factors. But imagine broccoli stuck in your teeth. So something simple, like if you want to remember olive oil, you know about the Mediterranean diet, you're cleaning your ears with olive oil, or wearing olive earrings, whatever. Eggs is probably one of my favorite, foods. Good protein. The yolk is high in choline, which leads to acetylcholine, which is good for cognitive health and memory. So eggs right in your throat. You're choking on a hard-boiled egg. So those are just like, things that I would just think about. And maybe people like kale and spinach. Great. Make them your shoulder pads. You hear about certain fish, and you have to be careful with fish, right? With the mercury and some of the toxins, but you get a clean source. Sardines, like imagine your collar, you have a necklace made out of sushi, salmon sushi or sardines, and use your senses. Again, imagine what that would smell like. And if you can't imagine it, imagine you can imagine it, right? Because your imagination, what is it? Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge, right? Knowledge is what is, imagination is what could be, right? We're recruiting more of those visual feelings, everything. And then finally, on your fingers, imagine some turmeric. The curcumin is anti-inflammatory. Imagine like you can't get this gold powder off your fingers. And then walnuts, we hear all the time, the vitamin E, almonds, imagine them coming out of your belly button. Very simple. And then imagine your bottom, everyone's favorite super brain food, dark chocolate, which people can use in their own imagination, whatever they picture. But
you mentioned there not just about nutrition, but the new version of the book has got some advice when it comes to nootropics as well.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the 10 things, is definitely supplementation. So that'll be coming up in a few.
Oh, yeah.
So just everybody imagine like your first place. Imagine my home, right? You're at the microwave and you have all these brain foods there, and you're taking it out and you're putting it on your body, right? And I bet you even an hour from now, one of the ways to encode is to do spaced repetition, right? And rehearse it, review it an hour later. And also the retrieval practice is so very important. So I mentioned it's encoding, making it emotional, making it visual, storing. We have a place to put it, the microwave, right? Or your nose. And then the active retrieval helps tremendously improve your memory. Even something like asking yourself, after you read something or listen to this podcast, quizzing yourself, right? It sounds so simple and common sense, but common sense is not always common practice.
You know what my favorite strategy for doing that was? For a good while, I was training on a morning time with a training partner, and I would tend to read. I usually read for about 15 minutes on the morning, as part of my morning routine. And I would always try and just explain one thing that I'd read that morning. Dude, I got to tell you about, I learned this story about World War II, or I learned this story about what happened in the space landing, or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was like an absolute turbocharged hack, because not only was I doing the retrieval thing, like memory is repeated retrieval, not repeated exposure.
Exactly.
And it was also doing the teaching thing, right? So I had to simplify it. And especially given what I do, it's all about, it's not just having an idea of the concept, it's also being able to display it, right, in a way that sounds cohesive and sort of slick. So that was a good hack for me. Teach your training partner about what you've read this morning.
Absolutely. And I feel like even, parents could do that with their kids. Instead of saying, how was school? And what are they going to say? Good, right? But asking them specifically what they learned, and going in micro, and giving them examples again, because it gets them to actively retrieve. So you have to light up that same cognitive web. And that's really what that memory is. Every single time it's reinforced, and you actually recreate the memory, right? And so by having that representation and describing it, it just makes it more sticky, right? They say neurons that fire together, they wire together. We have 86 billion neurons, and each of them have potentiality, like 10,000 different connections. So there are more connections, that your brain can make than there are stars in the known universe, right? I mean, this is the power that we have access to. But I feel like we're only using a small potentiality of it. But starting with a good brain diet is a good place to start. And then imagine that in the microwave, you put it on your body, and then test yourself and teach it to somebody else. You walk over to the second place. If you're in my home, and let's say we're going to have like a dinner together, and we go over to the stovetop. And the second key that I was talking about, the 10 keys for a limitless brain, is I got this from Dr. Daniel Amen, the famous brain doctor, psychiatrist. He's written like 40 books on the brain. Change your brain, change your life. He talks about killing ants is good for the brain, and ants stands for automatic negative thoughts. And that's exactly what we've been talking about, how your self-talk, becomes your reality, that thoughts are things, that all behavior is belief driven. If you think you can or think you can, either way, you're right? Henry Ford said it, that all the self-help kind of cliches, but there's, like with every cliche, there's some form and a nugget of truth there. So killing ants, automatic negative thoughts. And while I'm going through this, people could rate themselves 0 to 10. Like 0 to 10, how good is my diet? Because on the other side is the processed foods, the fried foods, the high sugar foods, right? That's going to spike your glucose and so on. But on the scale of 0 to 10, kind of rate yourself, because everyone wants to know what's the one thing. Everyone wants to like the magic pill, but there's not. There's a process of these 10 things. So the second one's killing ants. So just imagine on the stove, we're roasting ants, we're killing ants, right? And so that's very simple. You can't forget it. It takes more time to certainly describe it than it does to picture it. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. So there's a lot of descriptives there. And then walk over to the third place, which is in my case, happens to be a refrigerator. And this is exercise, right? We know that, especially strength training, right? It's been saying strength training, right? It's for so many benefits, right? BDNF, which we talked about, brain-derived neurotrophic factors, which is like fertilizer for the brain, helps support neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, neurotransmitters. You think about the dopamine, the serotonin, the endorphins that you get from working out, potentially systemic decrease in inflammation. It helps also with insulin resistance. I mean, so many benefits from physically working out. And I don't just mean that, but when you're rating yourself 0 to 10, is moving throughout the day. If we're talking about evolutionary science, the brain, the primary reason we have a brain is to control our movement. And as your body moves, your brain grooves. So it's not just a mind-body connection. There's certainly a body-mind connection. And that's one of the, we have a 10-month-old, right? And he's learning how to crawl. When they say crawling for children is so important because it stimulates different parts of their brain. Even the act of learning how to juggle. There's a study done at Oxford University that jugglers actually have bigger brains. By the act of learning how to juggle, you could actually create more white matter. And this could be something simple, like where you're rolling up socks and just doing it over a table or a bed, making it very simple, watching a YouTube video, starting with 1, then graduating to 2 and 3. I'm not talking about like, flaming swords or electric saws or anything like that. But, 0 to 10, how much are we moving? So imagine you're opening the refrigerator and you were doing your favorite exercise inside that. Your personal trainer's there, you're doing your whatever, your soul cycle, your burpees, your CrossFit, whatever, but it's in the refrigerator. All right. And that's to remind you of exercise. The fourth one is what you're alluding to. Let's go over to the fourth place, which for me, again, is the dishwasher. And those are your nutrients, your brain nutrients. I would always prefer people get it from their diet. That's my personal preference. And again, who am I to give, like people, I think ultimately we're talking about agency, that people should really, test it themselves, right? You could trust, but then you validate and test with your own personal experience. I would always prefer people get it from food, but if they're not eating eggs, then maybe they could supplement with choline, right? It's a nutrient found in foods like eggs and soybeans, and it plays a vital role in brain health, right? An acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, and you could harness that power, right? Some people want to supplement; they're not getting it from the fish. Maybe they want to supplement omega-3 fatty acids, particularly DHA, right, which is crucial for brain health. It's a primary, it's a structural component of the brain, and it plays a key role in memory. It plays a key role in brain function. I don't know. Are you a big supplement guy?
Yeah, I work with a company called Marek Health, and they're really great for blood work, and they've got me sort of vertically integrated into a whole bunch of stuff based on my system. Omega-3 esters I've been taking, which are like pharma grade omega-3s. We actually have this. This isn't out yet, but by the time that this episode happens, it will. So this is a drink that I've been working on with a friend for over 12 months now, and that is 0.5 gram of Cognizin, which is a branded cytocholine. It's a version of alpha GPC, rhodiola rosea, which is stress-induced fatigue reduction, Panax ginseng, natural caffeine, no sugar, L-theanine, B vitamins, all of that stuff. And I did 4 episodes in 27 hours in LA last weekend.
Wow.
Dude, the only way that I was able to get through that was adrenaline and the right amount of this. And I think there's definitely a place for acute performance enhancers for mental cognition, because how many, what am I going to do? Increase my egg consumption for 2 weeks in the build up to that. So I'm like, my cytocholine response is really great because I've had 30 eggs a day for the last 2 weeks or something. And I'll get your address once we're done. I'll send you some cases of this. I think you'll really enjoy it. And I'm a big fan of it. I've been playing around with nootropics for a long time. I found some stuff. Here's an anti-nootropic, actually. I got put on an anticholinergic about 2 years ago, just like a normal, very boring thing from the doctor. But dude, it was like someone had just halved the RAM that I had in my brain. I couldn't remember the name of places. My thoughts felt sluggish. And I'm very, very tuned into the texture of my mind, right? Like the nimbleness of, same with you, I'm sure, the nimbleness of my thoughts, my ability, especially for recall, and then not just recall, but all of the little nuances, and I'm telling the story and I have to remember to pause here and so on and so forth. And dude, it was just like walking through mud or something. It was awful.
I can't see you in that state because you're so good at tracking.
Thank you.
When some of the conversations you've had with mutual people that we know, like Alex, like he maybe loses place, and you pick it up exactly where they leave off.
I did it at dinner the other night. We were talking about something, and someone left some loop open, and I was like, it was 10 minutes later, and it was some story about a cat, and I really wanted to know about this cat, and I was like, dude, tell me about the cat. And he was like, oh yeah, you're in podcast mode, and I was like, I just want to know about this fucking story about the cat. But no, yeah, you're right. It's very scary to have. It was almost like having acute temporary dementia. And it was, dude, I absolutely do not wish that on anyone. So yes, make sure that you get your choline foods in, make sure that you get your cholinergic system working nicely. Alpha GPC is a fantastic solution. Cognizin, which is in this, in Newtonic, is an activated version of that, which is great. Around about 0.5 gram a day seems to be the effective dose. That's been pretty well studied. So yeah, I think supplementing with that is a good place to start.
Yeah, the ones I was talking about were more brain supplements. I separate that from nootropics in the book, but the choline supplementation, the DHAs, your B vitamins, right? Especially vitamin B6, B9, folate, B12 is vital for brain health. Magnesium is vital for everything, right? Every physiological function, learning, especially for your brain, learning, memory, certainly for your mood. Some people supplement with that in different forms of it. Like L-threonate, for various things, for
Yeah,
rest, for sleep.
glycinate. I've been playing around with. I can't remember the brand. It's this huge, big white tub that
Hmm.
Marek sent. It's like fat thing.
Okay.
But yeah, my sleep latency's improved an awful lot since
Yeah.
taking that. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, the simple stuff seems to be the ones that work.
And that's what I look for. Like even right now, I'm drinking some green tea, so it has the L-theanine, which is an amino acid that's found in green tea. It's obviously very popular nootropic. It also promotes relaxation without the drowsiness, and enhances brain function. You mentioned bacopa, which is an herb in Ayurvedic medicine, which can improve cognition and memory. Rhodiola, you mentioned also, which is a Scandinavian herb, which has been shown to help reduce mental fatigue and
It's going
improve.
extinct. You know that it's going extinct at the moment.
And I did
Yeah,
not know that.
we're having a nightmare. So the formulation for this that we spent ages putting together to be evidence-backed
Oh
research
wow!
based, all the rest of it, and we decided to put something in which is like a protected
Oh my
species.
goodness!
So the price of it's just gone through the roof. But it would be really cool. I would love to
Yeah,
do like a regenerative thing with the drink, where for every one plant that we use, we plant two more type thing.
smart.
That would be
Yeah.
cool. But I'm a huge fan. The rhodiola thing, this amazing study that was done on nurses. So they gave, for 28 days, they gave efficacious dose of rhodiola rosea, which is the same one we've got in there, to nurses working in the National Health Service in the UK. And they found that they made fewer commission errors under stress.
Wow.
And it's what's technically referred to in the literature as a reduction in stress-induced fatigue. And it just, for me, made a really big difference, because your ability to stay on task and to stay focused is, we said it at the very beginning, like context often is a primer ahead of everything else. And if the context that you're in is, I am stressed, I can't deal with this is getting to me, etc., etc., no matter how much your prep's done, like you've just got this huge ceiling that comes down on top of it. Okay, so I think we're in your dishwasher at the moment.
So we're putting all these supplements there. You could put the probably one of my favorite ones is creatine.
So
Also
good,
as well,
so
and so
good.
obviously a lot of people associate it to working out. It's found in higher levels in meat and fish, but it plays a huge role in energy metabolism, especially for improving cognitive function. Especially tasks that require short-term memory, and so and everything else that we talked about that were in the foods, like the turmeric, the curcumin, right? You could supplement with that. Some people make if I don't do the tea, sometimes I'll have some kind of lion's mane mushroom, which is potential neurotropic protective effects, which is it has been shown to be able to stimulate the synthesis of nerve growth factor, which could enhance cognition and potentially even lower inflammation. Caffeine, obviously a powerful one, especially if you add it with the L-theanine. So for me, I could get the energy without the jitters. I'm very, very sensitive. Some people like ginkgo also for blood flow. We actually put all this. We're going to actually take what's in the book, and people could go to brainnutrition.com and see kind of what I get, in the ones that are human studies, both from supplementation and also the nootropics. But that I would put all those bottles of supplements in the dishwasher.
All right.
And then that's number 4. Number 5 is we're at the sink. And what I believe is very important that we've talked a lot about on our podcast is the social networks. Having a positive peer group has been shown to be good for your brain, because you've heard this a million times, right? Who you spend time with is who you become. We're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. If you're on 9 broke people, be careful, because you're going to probably be number 10. We have these things called mirror neurons, where we're always imitating people around us unconsciously, usually. And I always tell people to watch. The things we're mirroring and imitating are usually the W in watch are words. where we tend to have the same language pattern, same slang as the people that we spend time with. The A in watch are the actions or the behaviors, because it has a lot less to do. Like if you smoke, has less to do with your biological networks or your neurological networks and more your social networks. If your friends smoke, that's definitely more of an influence to you than your biology. And then the T is our thoughts. We tend to have the same recurring thoughts as the people around us. C is character. We tend to maintain the same level of character, integrity, and moral standards as the people around us. And then finally, the H in watch are our habits. Right, you've heard this phrase where first you create your habits, then your habits create you. And we talk a lot about morning routines and evening routines. I've enjoyed a lot of the things that you've talked about it also as well. So all the positive peer group is so important. We all need people to encourage us, to challenge us, to call us on our stuff, to cheerlead for us. And if you haven't found that person, be that person. Right.
It's also an opportunity to have someone to teach to, right? Not everyone has a Substack or a podcast or a YouTube channel where they're teaching random people on the internet, but you have the opportunity to be around people who are curious and who are going to teach you about new things. Like, dude, some of the conversations I've had in between sets in the gym have been some of the best things that I've ever done. Like my housemate literally has a podcast called The Lift Companion, where he goes and trains in the gym, and the podcast is about what happens in between the sets. And it's awesome. It's really, really fun. And you realize that, you have this really lovely periodized, all right, we're going to talk for a moment, 60 seconds, 90 seconds during the rest period, then someone's going to train, then the other person's going to train, and then we're going to come back to it and we're going to do another 90 seconds. And it's this really lovely rhythm, actually, to talking about something. I very much enjoy it. And any excuse to go into the gym more and excuse it as learning.
Absolutely. And there's certain brain types that we talk about in the new book. These are cognitive types. It's an assessment that I put together that I've been using.
I did the test.
Oh, good. Yeah, we could talk about that if a few minutes after these 10 things. But like elephants are highly empathetic, and they love that, especially the community. They love collaboration. They're the ones that keep everyone together, and they have high levels of empathy. So they would really, those are wonderful people to have in your life also as well. Because sometimes learning is not solo; it's social for sure. Book clubs and having accountability partners or workout, buddies. All that's really important. But just imagine your positive peer group at the sink, and we're all just like washing dishes or something like that. And that helps you to anchor it. So then when you're giving your TED talk, you can go through and just walk to the microwave and you're like, oh, all the brain foods, right? And you can probably, some of the people listening, if they weren't multitasking when they're listening, they probably remember that there are avocados and blueberries and broccoli and olive oil and eggs and so on, all over their body. And then on the stovetop, you're killing roasting ants. And then you open up the refrigerator and people know that there's movement and exercise. As your body moves, your brain grooves. You go to the dishwasher and you have all your nootropics there, and then they're at the sink and your positive peer group. And then you walk into the other room. We'll do the rest really fast, super fast, so that we get close this loop. I know you talked about the Zeigarnik effect, and the psychologist whose last name happens to be Zeigarnik, and she's at a cafe. The story goes where she sees everyone, all the wait staff, deliver the orders and take everyone's order and not write any of it down. And which is pretty magnificent, because
I love it when someone does that. The waiter comes up and he's got his hands behind his back. It's almost a flex. Like they know what they're doing.
Oh yeah. And I'm still, as much as I know about memory, I'm just like, oh, please write this down, because we'll mess this up and have to wait again. But the Zeigarnik effect is basically they will retain that order until they are delivered, because the brain doesn't like open loops, right? And Netflix and all these binge shows, they're really good at keeping open loops to keep people coming back, right? And but yeah, we want to close this loop for everybody so they're not like raging on YouTube and stuff. Now, number 6. So go into my second room, and the sixth place is going clockwise, is the sliding glass door. And so I just want you to remember the 6th key is a clean environment. Clean environment. We find that your external world is a reflection of your internal world. And, you clean your desk or make your bed, or maybe you're on your computer and everything's in the right folder. You tend to have clarity of thought. And when I say clean environment, also going back to like, when you ingested that that toxin that kind of threw you off. There are a lot of neurotoxins in our environment. It could be off-gassing from furniture or from your carpet. And so, having clean air is important, whether you have the windows open or you have an air purifier. I would include a clean environment, even the light sources, right? And so many offices and schools, they use the like fluorescent lights, and that's probably not, your eyes are only part of your brain that's outside of your skull, right? And when you have visual fatigue, it leads to mental fatigue. And they probably fill offices and schools with that because it's ultra cheap, also as well. But clean environment, so from the lighting, from the water, from the air, and also just organize, recondo your mind. So you get 0 to 10, kind of rate yourself how clean your environment is. Now, some people say a messy environment is good for creatives, but that's probably is true because it stimulates.
Well,
But
think about it this way: like walking into any artist's studio,
right?
What have you got? There's a torn up novel over the far side and cigarette ends, and there's a magazine, and there, that's not the environment in which you want to do your tax return. Right?
Yeah,
your tax
exactly.
return is in the office next door. It's nice and clean, it's clinical, it's sterile, focused.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to try and do your next ideation in this room that's bereft of any inspiration for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and also like keeping track of where everything is could also be some undue, memory or RAM that you're doing, just consciously keep track of everything, right? It's a lot easier to put your keys in the same spot every single time. So you don't have to kind of think about it going back to storage, right? Encoding storage, and then you retrieve it because it's always in the same storage place. So you have a physical file folder, not an actual file folder, but a place that you store it in also as well. And you've talked about this, like regulating certain activities for where you thrive. Like you're not going to work in your bed because you're going to get that angst in your executive functioning, and then you wonder why later on you can't sleep there, right? Because of all that state is being the emotional state is, and that activity is being anchored to the environment, like we talked about submerging underwater. It's not just the information, it's the feelings that are being anchored. And so like even something simple like if you use your iPad to watch Netflix and that's your entertainment system, don't do work on it, right? I mean, something simple like that.
I really struggle to read on my phone for that reason. There's a great tool called Send to Kindle for Google Chrome. Nice. And it's just an extension. It's an Amazon like official application, and you press one button and the web page becomes fully optimized for Kindle and delivers to your device. If you got a Paperwhite or an Oasis or something, and it turns your Kindle into a read later app. But the alternative for me was to try and use Pocket or something, or like I can't remember that other one everyone uses. And like, I'm going to read it on my phone. I'm like, no, if I'm on my phone, I'm in task switching, messaging, executive function mode. If I'm on my Kindle, all I'm thinking about is, like if I tracked on my Whoop, I bet that as soon as I pick my Kindle up, I just get parasympathetic activation. 100% that happens. That the device that's in my hands primes the way that I feel.
Without a doubt. For me, I'd read most of mine on, print. It's just I'm looking for any opportunity to not be on a screen. But without a doubt, our devices get anchored the same way as our environment. So yeah, I would say number 6, think about the door, is just clean environment. So just imagine we're just cleaning the glass and we're just cleaning the environment around the door, which happens to be the 6th place. The 7th place is the radiator. So I have a radiator there, and I would just say the 7th key is sleep. So just imagine you're sleeping on the radiator, and that would be very uncomfortable, right? You feel the heat, and but sleep, obviously, for your brain is so very important. It's probably the number one thing. It's something that I struggle with for a long time. I had undiagnosed obstructive sleep apnea, severe, where I stopped breathing 250 times a night, and I was only sleeping a couple hours a night for 5 straight years, and doctors didn't know how or why, and I had this kind of misdiagnosed for something else, and I eventually had this surgery at UCLA where they took out my uvula, soft palate, tonsils. It was very painful. To create more airflow, my sleep jumped up to like 4 hours, but it'd be like 250 times a night is a lot because each time counts as 10 seconds. So that's what an episode was. So it's like the doctor was saying, no wonder you're not sleeping. It's like somebody coming in and put a pillow over your face a couple hundred times a night. And so I had a lot of, anxiety around it. And I use CPAP and dental devices and all these things, but optimizing your sleep, because specifically for your brain, because when you don't get a good night's sleep, how are you performing the next day? How's your ability to solve problems? How's your focus? How's your mental endurance, right? How's your memory? When you sleep, you consolidate short to long-term memory. If you have long-term memory issues, maybe do a sleep study yourself. You could get it easily done at home. Most doctors could prescribe that. It's also where you clean out, the sewage system kicks on in your brain that can lead to, because if it's not taken care of, it can lead to brain aging challenges. I lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's when I had 2 years after I had my brain injury when I was 5. So that's why I'm just very passionate about brain health. And my inspiration really is my desperation. But we've heard all the great brain hacks. There's a whole chapter in here on how to optimize your sleep. We've done many episodes on it. My favorite ones, and I know your audience knows this, but I just want to say it in a different way just to remind them, because are they doing it, right? Because I know sleep loss is a big challenge. Direct sunlight first thing in the morning, right? To reset your circadian rhythms. Caffeine, I can't do past 2:00 in the afternoon, because at the half-life, I'm extremely sensitive to caffeine. So I just want to kind of pull that back a little bit. And then just realize that your brain loves a schedule. Everyone has an alarm to wake up. I really would have an alarm to trigger you phasing to sleep. Otherwise, it becomes 11:00, 12:00 at night, and we're not prioritizing our sleep. But your brain loves a schedule, even on the weekends. And then, as hunter gatherers, we would, going back to why we are the way we are, we would know it'd be time to sleep because our environment would tell us. There'd be a dip in 2 environmental factors: temperature and light. Right. So the colder, now where it's so cold, it's distracting, keeping you up, you're shivering, but also, darker. And sometimes we want to get off those devices also, because they can mimic, it could fool your mind into thinking it's still daylight. Right.
I read this a couple of weeks ago, which is just a nice, again, mnemonics and memes and easy ways to remember stuff. The 3-2-1 rule of 3 hours before you go to bed, no more food. 2 hours before you go to bed, no more liquids. 1 hour before you go to bed, no more devices. The most difficult one, embarrassingly, is the 1 hour before bed, no more devices, because we're so acculturated to using them that you think, well, what am I going to do for that hour before I go to bed if I'm not using my devices? And it's actually a pretty good question. But certainly for me, I find if I sleep, if I eat close to going to bed, my sleep is wildly disrupted. Whoop did... this is a really cool thing that they do. They aggregate anonymously all of the user data, and they look at correlations in journal entries. And they know, right? They know what people say that they did, and they actually can read the data on the back end. And eating close to bedtime was one of the biggest. Alcohol and eating close to bedtime were 2 of the biggest disruptors when it comes to sleep.
That's been my personal experience also. If I eat, I can't go to bed, and so if I end up finishing a meal because I'm out with clients or something at 9:00, then I'm pretty much screwed, because I'm not going to bed till at least midnight also. And alcohol certainly could have that effect also as well. Working out sometimes before you go to bed, because you want to bring your heart rate down. But I will go into a sauna in the evening, or a hot bath, especially like an Epsom salt, because the magnesium helps you to be able to relax, because it, absorbing it transdermally. Also, when you leave the sauna or you leave the hot bath, your core body temperature drops, right? Which is a signal to produce melatonin. Same thing with the lighting, But now with modern conveniences, we don't have to have a drop in temperature or light, right? So we have to take agency again and make conscious decisions for our sleep hygiene. So that's and also dreaming. Also, I talk about how to remember your dreams and a lot of that, like in the book, and other things you could do, because it's remarkable in that REM state where you do a lot of your brain doesn't shut off at night. I'll just offer this as inspiration. And a lot of inventions, works of art, literature, music came from dream states. They say that Mary Shelley created Frankenstein in her dream. A chemist created the framework of the periodic table in his dream. Paul McCartney came up with the song Yesterday in a dream, right? And just lots of stories. And Elias Howe created the sewing machine in his dream, like these kind of things. But that supposes you're getting good sleep, right? Because not just the quantity of sleep, it's the quality of your slow brain waves, like the deep sleep and the REM sleep. That sleeping on the radiator. So just imagine that, and everyone remembers that. Then you walk over next, we have a china cabinet, and there you want to be able to remember a brain protection. protect your brain? This is a simple one, right? Your brain is very resilient, but it's also very fragile. Having had, 3 head injuries before age 12, and I had this, I had my brain scanned and did all these hyperbaric chambers and just kind of getting blood flow in the areas that were damaged. Just imagine you're headbutting the china cabinet with a helmet, and the helmet reminds you to protect your brain. And then finally, we have like a couch kind of area here, and on the couch you can remember the next thing, which is new learnings. So just imagine you and I'm talking to the listeners here on that couch, and we maybe have a whiteboard, and we're just putting the words new learnings in your favorite color, right? Because it's so important. Just as you keep the way you build your body, right, is through novelty and nutrition and then sleep, right? But same thing with your mental muscles, right? It requires novelty and nutrition. And it can even potentially help you to age better. Meaning there was a study done with nuns, and they wanted to find out, there was a longevity study, living 80, 90 and above. Then researchers wanted to find out what was the contributing factors. Half of it had to do with their emotional faith and gratitude. I'm summarizing this. The other half, they were lifelong learners. They're always reading, having debates, conversations. And they're suggesting because of it, it added years to their life and life to their years. They put this study on the cover of Time magazine. It was called Aging with Grace. But on a scale of 0 to 10, and everyone who's listening has a 10, right, out of 10, because they're always learning. That would be key, because that's really where the novelty, the newness, right? You make new connections. It can be very supportive. And then, so imagine that on the couch, we're doing new learnings. And then finally, the dining table there, let's say the last one is stress management. All right. We talked about stress and coping with stress. So whatever you do, we talked about how chronic stress, it can have negative effects on the brain. Maybe it's body work on the dining table, or you're meditating on the dining room table. And just take a moment and just picture that. So the idea here, using the storage, we started this with encoding, storing, retrieving, is we've encoded it using visualization and feelings and story. We've stored it in very specific places on our body, or, in my 2 rooms of my home. And then now can you retrieve it? So now you're on stage and you're going and you see the microwave, and I'm talking to people really who are listening at home. What does that microwave remind you of? Right? What's coming out of the microwave, and what are you putting on your body? All these brain foods. And you probably remember it from avocados all the way to dark chocolate, and backwards. Because when you understand how your memory works, you can work your memory. And you go over the stovetop and you're killing ants, right? You open up the refrigerator, and I'm just kind of making this interactive, the exercising. And then you have your dishwasher, and it's filled with those brain nutrients, right? The nootropics. And then who's washing the dishes? All your positive friends. And then you go in the other room, the sliding glass door, you're cleaning it because you're cleaning your environment. And then the radiator, what are you doing on it? The behavior is you're sleeping, right? To remind you of sleep. And then you go over to the china cabinet, putting on a helmet to remind you of brain protection. And then you look at the couch. What are we doing? We're learning, always be learning. And then finally, the dining table, getting a massage, you're meditating, managing your stress. So it's just kind of a fun, and it takes way longer to describe it. But I would challenge people to do their own home. And then they can when you're having a conversation with someone, you're doing an interview with somebody, maybe you're not taking notes, but you're taking mental notes, and you're putting some of the key points that you want to remember in places, either on your body or off. And it's really infinite. It is limitless, the amount of places. If you see card counters do that, or people, like if you see me memorize 100 words or whatever, this is a solid strategy to be able to remember facts, figures, presentations, and so much more.
I had a card counter, actually. Stephen Bridges, British guy who has a huge YouTube channel that people should go and check out. It's really cool. And he goes and takes on casinos on tours, literally like that movie 21. And there's a big player, and there's the counters, and there's the spotter, and all this stuff. It's wild. And he was just like, I'm just a normal guy. I was into maths and magic, and then realized that with a bit of training and a bit of work on my memory, that I could keep a hold of the count, and I can take casinos for 150 or 250 grand over the space of a weekend, which is not a bad earner.
And traditional card counting is like math, right? So they have a plus one. If you went through it on your pocket, right? +1, -1, 0. And each card has amounts, so that you kind of know the probability of a 10 coming up, and you can make your bets accordingly. But how they communicated it in 21 with their partners that were undercover at the table is they would use signals. and they would use an alphanumeric code where every number has a sound. And this is like a code where like there are 10 digits, and there are also 10 consonant sounds in the English language, and each one has something. So if they happen to be, up 15, for example, or in this case, they use something different. They use basic association. So they said like, hey, if it happens to be happens to be a 6 up, and that was about the card counting, 6 could be represented by like a gun, like a 6-shooter, right?
Yeah,
and they would
yeah.
use that in
That's
the conversation,
cool. That's
and then
nice.
people would know like the exact number.
They
But
were
it's fun
doing
stuff.
they have non-verbal signals as well.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to keep on saying the same thing in case Mike's now using AI pick up on the things that they're saying, and they can flag that in the back end. So yeah, it's a permanent war of evolution between the card counters and the casinos.
Yeah. And this could be a disclaimer also. This is for recreational purposes only for the listeners.
It's not illegal. It's not, card counting is not illegal, according to Stephen, in the United States, in certain places in the United States. One of the things that I think might be useful, I'm thinking about the use case of what we've gone through so far. Great in terms of optimizing our minds. We mentioned at the beginning that people have got an awful lot of information that they're either indexing, consuming in one form or another. One of the things that I wish someone had taught me before I started the show was about that discerning skill that we mentioned previously. And one of the ones that I've used, which I think is really great and almost alleviates pretty much all of the stress. There are certainly things that you have to learn, right? If you're going to go and be a doctor, you need to learn all of the things in this, and you're going to be tested on all of the things. And if you're going to learn to drive a forklift truck or whatever it is, right? Like there are certain things where you have to learn the entire body of work. But for recreational learning, or for stuff that you're going to use to improve your life, Tim Ferriss has an idea called the good shit sticks. And what he means by that is we often castigate ourselves for not remembering things that we weren't interested in remembering, simply because we have this sort of arbitrary sense that I should remember all of the stuff that I listen to, or I should remember most of the stuff that I listen to. But really, your job as you listen to podcasts like this, or read books, or Substack articles, or whatever it might be, your job is to discern what are the elements of this that are specifically applicable to me. And even that as a decision tree, it's like, we can get all up in our head about, should I be using that? Am I ever going to want to try and learn to juggle? Maybe I should buy more socks so that I can do this. It's like, ultimately, the thing that you listen to on a podcast episode, or read in a book, or whatever, that you can't not take a photo or a screen recording of, you can't stop thinking about it. That's the good shit, right? Yeah. And with that, okay, let's go narrow and deep on that one particular thing, and we can use all of the tools that we've spoken about today to try and help really embed that. But when it comes to the discerning side of stuff, massive overload of information. How is it that I'm going to choose what's useful to me? For me, it's the most embodied and natural way of doing it. There's no decision tree. There's no nothing. I'll just be listening to some. Morgan Housel told me this story yesterday about the guy that was choosing the working out how fast people could run. I was like, I can't not remember that, right? Like I'm pretty sure I tried to explain it last night and failed after I'd spoken to him. So all right, that's the thing. I don't know why that's the thing, but that's super important to me. So I'm just going to use that. So yeah, from a discerning perspective, I think the good shit sticks. Yeah. Really lovely, simple rule.
I like it. Primarily, our brain is more of a deletion device nowadays. We're trying to keep information out, because if we there's like probably 1 billion stimuli that in our environment, or things that we could be thinking that we could focus on. And so for me, it's a reductive process. It's eliminating, because, keeping the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, right? And so I think questions are the answer in a lot of these cases. You have a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, RAS, which determines what we're going to shine a spotlight on. So you could use that analogy. If you're reading a page in a book, getting to the end and forgetting what you just read, I guarantee you don't have adequate questions that you're obsessed about, because then if you did, you'd be shining a spotlight and say, there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer, right? And we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and a lot of those thoughts come in the form of questions. And questions, some people suggest, is part of the act of thinking. You're asking and answering questions of yourself. Questions like, what's the best use of this moment? Or, you're mentioning, with Tim, it's like, how do we make this easy? right? Or how do we make this more enjoyable? Or what's the lead domino, right? These questions, or how do I reach my 10-year goal in 6 months, right? Where you can't just force it and just work harder. You have to, think differently. And so, I think 3 questions again that I obsess about when I'm listening to a podcast or reading something is things like, how can I use this? Right. And then I'll actually extrapolate and say like, okay, this could be useful. And then that's my filtering system, because if I was like, oh, I can't really use this, then I'll just kind of set it aside. This is not important for me. I don't even note take that way. I'll put a line down the page, and on the left side, I'll take notes. This is how you read faster or learn languages, whatever. I remember people's names, the kind of stuff that we teach in the book. But then if my mind wanders, that right brain imagination wanders, it wanders on the right side of the page, and I'm capturing like, how does this relate to what I already know? Right? What questions do I have about this? How am I going to use it? Why must I use it? Right?
What's a real cool feature for the Kindle obsessors amongst us? If you use highlights, there's actually a bit where you can highlight and then add a note, and you just use the little crappy keypad on the screen. But just a tiny little bit of context is great. Do you use Readwise? Do you know what that is?
No, I don't. I know what it is. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, just when it resurfaces the highlights from Kindle, it also adds the notes in.
Yeah.
So you're not just resurfacing that one particular highlight. It also reminds you of the link of the thing that you made. So it's like networks of information are being sent back toward you. I think that's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I love digital because when people are handwriting notes, it's been shown to help comprehension and retention, but certainly digital note taking is a wonderful way to store information, share information, and integrate it in other things also as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that's still outstanding, I think, from the tool set that we've spoken about so far is concentration and focus. Yeah. I think a lot of people have a very negative relationship with their ability to stay focused on task. So what do you usually look to first? What are the big movers, the 80-20s of focus and attention?
It depends the context and the behavior of where, like when people come to me and say they want a better memory, I hear like somebody coming to a coach and saying, I want to be better at sports. I'm like, well, what sport specifically? Because there's different methodologies and strategies and tools depending on their goals. Same thing with focus. If people are losing focus when they read, there could be a number of contributing factors. One of them is what we mentioned. They don't have enough questions, so they're not getting those answers. But another, it could be if they're reading and they're losing focus, their mind wanders, they get easily distracted. It could be they're reading too slow, right? You have this incredible brain and you feed this supercomputer brain when you're reading one word at a time. Metaphorically, we're like starving our mind. And if you don't give your brain the stimulus it craves and needs, it'll seek entertainment elsewhere in the form of distraction. So sometimes you actually don't have the focus because you're reading too slow, because it's like driving slow. If you're going really slow in your neighborhood, you're not really focused on the act of driving, right? You're thinking about something that you have to do that day. You're drinking your coffee. You might be texting, whatever. You can be 5 different things when you're going slow. But if you're racing cars and taking hairpin turns as fast as you could go, you're not thinking about the dry cleaning, or you're not trying to text. You're completely focused on 2 things: what's in front of you and the actual act of driving, right? And that's the equivalent of, I found, with reading. We have an online academy. It's the largest online accelerated learning academy in the world. We have students in every country. Yeah. So we have a lot of data, right? And we find actually that in general, the faster readers actually have better comprehension because they have better focus. And so speed equals focus equals comprehension, and comprehension gives you the retention. So I would challenge people that they're learning maybe processing too slow. And if you sped it up a little bit, you wouldn't have time to distract yourself and focus on other things. And you'd be monotasking as opposed to trying to multitask. And the other part of focus would be on your brain type. And I know you took the quiz. This is something I've been using with coaching clients for years. And I realized just how there's personalized medicine based on like your genetics, or personalized nutrition based on maybe your microbiome. There's also, we created a personalized learning based on your brain type. And I realized, and I created this model, and it's a framework, right? To be useful and explain our behavior and the results we're getting, and also the behaviors and results of the people around us. So just the quick of it is, I pulled inspiration from like personality types like Myers-Briggs, introvert, extrovert, multiple intelligence theory, learning styles, verbal, audio, kinesthetic, lateral dominance, like left brain, right brain. Anyway, so it's code, CODE. And these are, I use animals because everyone wants to take like a quiz and what Game of Thrones character am I, or what, I don't know, Harry Potter or school, that kind of thing. So it's kind of fun. I don't know, it maybe take 4 minutes, did it? Like something like that.
Yeah, I did it on my phone.
Yeah, it's free. There's nothing to buy, and so we're offering this out to the world because one, it's not how smart you are; it's how are you smart, right? And this gives you shines a light on how you are smart. So code is an acronym, of course, for the animals. The cheetah are your fast actors, right? They implement really fast. They have strong intuition. They love to adapt, right? The owls are they love logic. They're very analytical, methodical. They thrive when given a space to dissect, to ponder, to analyze things. These are individuals who benefit from deep work sessions, right, away from distractions. You have your dolphins, the D in code, and these are your creative visionaries. They have strong pattern recognition. Some entrepreneurs, they're visionary thinkers. They can maybe see a future or an innovation when other people can't quite see it yet. So these are your creatives. These are your dreamers, right? And then finally, the E are your elephants. And your elephants, I mentioned earlier, are your empaths. These they're very empathetic. They're high collaborative souls, and they are the glue that holds like teams together. And just to give people a visual, take anything in popular culture. I know it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know if you have a favorite show or uh, movie that we could draw on, whether it's Star Wars or James Bond or Harry Potter or Friends. Like if we take Friends, like you see the archetypes everywhere. So like if you watch Friends, Ross would be an owl, right? He's a scientist. He's very astute. He studies research, right? You would say that someone like Joey would be the cheetah, very instinctual, just acts, right? You would say Phoebe is the creative dolphin, right? With her music and her art and her the visions and imagination that she has. Maybe Monica would be the elephant, right? Brings everyone together, always wants to host all the parties and so on. But you'll see this in everything. James Bond would be the cheetah, right? M, who runs MI6, would be the owl. Very, very, very logical, methodical. Moneypenny, her right hand, would be more the elephant. Q, who makes all the inventions, would be the creative, visionary. So you could go through and you could do Harry Potter, you could do any of this, but also it informs the careers. Like I had our team, which we have a few dozen people around the world. It's remarkable. 100% of our customer service team were elephants because they found they found their element, right? They're there to be loyal and supportive and empathetic and have your backs, right? Because their success, is your success, and your success is their success. Our financial person, our CFO, is an owl, right? Our CEO, she's a creative visionary. She has this, positively impact 1 billion brains, right? And has very imaginative things of using that. So it's interesting once you understand your brain type, because it also can inform your learning. And so when people take the quiz, it's we created, I think we sent you at mybrainanimal.com.
Correct.
Right? MyBrainAnimal, and it takes 4 minutes, and you can send it to your spouse, and it'll explain their behavior. And so you don't have to get like judgmental and everything, because that's just how they think, and this is how they learn. And this is also correlated to how they, even communicate with people. And so it's a kind of a fun way to kind of get to know each other and stuff, because the cheetah tends to be more direct, right? Straight to the point. And speech is very concise. And I know, and now you could overlap other communication and influence models over this, right? To make it even more rich. And, because I'm sure you have distinctions that I don't have on this, but, cheetah's very concise, focus on action, very action oriented words. They're very instinctive. They trust their gut. They have strong intuition. They speak in a way that's very independent. Owls are analytical, methodical. And think about it, an owl would invest different than a cheetah. They would buy different than a cheetah. They would be influenced. They would date, different. They would communicate, right? Owls would be a little bit more patient. They're like yourself. Like you do so much research, right? You are willing to listen. You pause. You reflect before speaking, right? These are owl traits. I'm not sure what
I read the PDF. The PDF was cool because it was talking about, it's nice to be told what you are, or
Right.
a description that makes you feel seen or makes your whatever disposition feel like less of a just weird personal curse. But it's also interesting because it says things like, here are some of the areas that you might want to look out for. Here are some of your potential weaknesses. This is the way that you can communicate better with the elephants in the room and the cheetahs in the room and so on and so forth. And it's cool, dude. I think the quiz was great. The PDF that you guys give afterward also really cool. So people should go and check that out. And you've got new book will be out now when this episode drops as well. Newly revised version. There it is. I didn't get it. What's happening? I didn't get that. I got a digital version. Send me that version.
We're gonna send this to you along with the t-shirt. We got your back.
I'm fully Kwik pilled once I get that.
Yes, I can't wait. The expanded edition was updated with all new case studies from previous readers, and it also is all about momentum. So we added chapters in there. Once you unlimit your mindset, your motivation, and the methods of speed reading, memory, all the stuff, focus, getting in flow, habits, all the stuff we could, discuss offline. We talk about momentum, how to create greater momentum in your life. And we do it through understanding your brain type, right? So I put all the research and examples in there. The quiz is also in the book because that knowing yourself will help you to, have less friction in your life and relate with others and influence others better. We also have the nootropic section in there, which people could enjoy because that could actually have more momentum. We talk about learning agility, like in a post-pandemic world, from, whether you're working hybrid or remote or in person. There's a whole large chapter on AI too, how to use AI to enhance your HI. And for me, HI is your human intelligence, right? And it's not artificial intelligence. For me, it's really about augmenting your intelligence and different ways you could use it to accelerate your own learning and earning in life. But yeah, limitlessbook.com. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this, and I want to thank you for the work that you do. Can I ask which animal you tested it? Owl. Okay. That's what I was saying, because even with the questioning, you ask probing questions to get clarity, and often, you could play devil's advocate and you could test an idea's validity. Like and you're very structured, the way you speak. And I try to follow you when I'm listening, when I'm working out and everything. And I kind of I love the pace and cadence and the way you make ideas, very sticky and relevant in people. But yeah, it's been a wonderful pleasure. We have to have you on our podcast too. I'm
down. Get me on when you need, Jim. And I really appreciate the kind words. I've been a massive fan of your work for a long time. Everyone should go and check out your book. They can go and do the brain quiz. And dude, I'm excited to see what you do next. It seems like there's always more desire for people to improve their brain function. I don't think it could come at a better time than right now. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Can I challenge everyone to do one quick thing?
Absolutely.
Take a screenshot of this. Remember I said that, knowledge is not only is potential power, past power we use when we take a small, simple step, and something that everyone can do right now. Yes, you could obviously go to do the brain quiz and stuff like that, but take a screenshot wherever you're consuming this, listening to it or watching it, and tag Chris, tag myself, we get to see it, and just share either your brain animal or one thing you're going to do for a better brain. We went through at least 10 different science-based things that you could focus on. Maybe it's reading a little bit more, adding these brain foods, these nootropics that Chris has, or something, prioritizing your sleep. Add that in the post, and that way, and tag us so we get to see it. And I'll actually repost some of my favorites and gift a few copies out to the community just as a thank you, and reinforcing that knowledge times action is power. I truly believe that there's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting, and the goal is we show up every single day until we're introduced. So it's an honor to be on this journey with all of you.
Hell yeah. Jim Kwik, ladies and gentlemen. Jim, I really appreciate you. Thank you. If you enjoyed that episode, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And don't forget to subscribe.